So today's topic is scar tissue, but we're quickly going to run through stuff that we've talked about before. So like I said, it's very, very important that when you're doing your stretching that it's very gentle, because we don't want to cause an inflammatory response. So this is old hat. So I said, you know, intensity of stretch has to be about 3 or 4 out of 10. 10 being that burning, discomfort, sensation, pain, which we don't want. The duration, we said that the stretch has to last about 60 seconds, which is very, very important. Anything greater than that, upwards to 2 minutes, you're going to feel tighter, because your proprioceptive tissues, these are the tissues that are involved for sensing your environment. The Golgi tendon organ, which is between your tendon and your muscle, and the muscle spindle, which is in the middle of the muscle belly. These are the way that you process your environment. And this is why a lot of athletes that have issues that have had injuries, one of the biggest things we see in sports and in injuries is that the athlete's proprioception is off. 2006 World Cup, I think it was, when Michael Owen had his injury. Yeah, it was 2006. But May of 2006, I called up Paul Winsper, who was the S&C for Newcastle at the time, and I said, a month out of the World Cup, I don't even have enough time to work on Michael Owen. But Michael Owen will suffer a major injury, and he did. He blew his knee out because he thought when he thought he planted, he hadn't planted, and when he did plant, then he moved, then he torqued his knee. So proprioception is very, very important. So anytime you have injuries, it's one of the most important things that we need to develop, again, in athletes. So, and then frequency, you know, 3 times per muscle group, preferably 2 hours post-activity or before bed. This is to help the body recover, regenerate. And reason we don't want to do it right after activities, because we got muscle fatigue, we're tired. We need to replenish our glucose glycogen, which is very, very important. Hot contrast baths I like, because it actually gives the pumping sensation, because the veins aren't that muscular, so they have little valves inside of them that helps them move the blood to the heart. So now, stability, balance, and control, we basically said eliminate muscle contraction during the stretch, and that's basically, I'm giving a quick example. I don't consider this a stretch for the soleus or the calf or the gastroc, because the person is supporting his body weight while he's doing the stretch. If you want to stretch the soleus, you just sit down. You want to basically relax the muscle, so therefore you have more control as to how much intensity you can put in the stretch. The whole key is about intensity, okay? So then we said microstretching chain versus a kinetic chain. There is a sequence to stretching, guys. It's very, very important. A quick example, like I said, if you want to stretch your hamstrings, you first of all stretch your calves, and then you go and you stretch your glutes, and then you stretch your hamstrings because of the origin insertion. That's what you got to look at with regards to the muscles. So the hamstring originates in the glute area, and it inserts in the gastroc area below the knee. So there is a sequence, which is very, very important. And when I prescribe stretches, or Mike Ciamello, who works with me, when we prescribe stretches, we basically put together stretches. Like last week when Alan brought up the gentleman who has a soleus problem, we actually look at the problem, the issue, and then we try to put the stretches together that are going to help address the issue. The key again is you have to do it bilaterally. You just can't do it on just the one side. So basically it's focusing on origins and insertions and their overlap. So the forces, we got to go through this stuff. We said compression, tension, and shearing. These are the 3 main forces that athletes work with. Compression being the biggest one, hopping, bounding, jumping. Tension is what stretching is, and shearing is torquing, which can put a lot of stress in the tendons themselves and the muscles. So these are the 3 main forces that athletes deal with. And then we said rotation and bending, and then gravity. Everything is based on gravity. How you move through your environment is very, very important. So now we also talked about antagonists and agonists. This is a balanced system. So classic example is hip flexors and hamstrings. If you have a balanced system, then your pelvis, or the pelvis itself, sits in the proper position, the anatomical position that it's been designed for. However, if you actually have, let's say, a tighter hip flexor, which in this case is the agonist, which is thicker, what it does is it causes an anterior rotation of the pelvis forward through the head of the femur, and it lengthens the hamstring. A lot of people think that a hamstring, when it's really, really tight in a position like this, that the hamstring is tight. No, the hamstring is weak because it's been lengthened. The hip flexors are very, very tight, and they're pulling the pelvis forward, lengthening the hamstring, and the hamstring is in a position that it would be more or less easier to strain. Okay, so training and trauma, quickly, we talked about pain. Pain is a response that basically tells you that you're going to cause tissue damage or you are causing tissue damage. So the whole idea behind microstretching is why take the body to pain and discomfort? Because pain and discomfort or pain does cause tissue damage. And the other thing we touched upon is the secret killer, which is inflammation. Everything in the body is an inflammatory response. In fact, I honestly believe that it was through inflammation that the cells 4 or 5 billion years ago were able to process their environment. So if they touched something that caused the reaction, they were more likely to go somewhere else. So that was an inflammatory response. And this, to me, is the information highway that the body has for itself with regards to dealing with the environment. Even COVID-19 is a huge inflammatory response. We call it a cytokine storm. And here's the interesting thing. Anytime you train and you cause muscle damage, you're releasing the same cytokines, the same pro-inflammatory proteins that are being released with COVID-19. Interleukin-1 beta, tumor necrosis factor alpha, and IL-6. These are the 3 main ones. And they're released every time there's an inflammatory response, whether it's tissue damage or whether it's an infection like what we're going through right now. So, autonomic nervous system, quickly touch upon it. We said the sympathetic, fight, flight, or fright. Tom touched about this in his lecture 2 weeks ago, and I really thank him again for giving us that opportunity to listen to him. So fight, flight, or fright, sympathetic nervous system response, that is anytime you cause pain and discomfort, this is what you're stimulating. You're stimulating the idea to remove yourself from that stimulus. So sympathetic, pain, tissue damage. This is the easiest way to say it. To think about it. And then we have the parasympathetic. This is the system that you stimulate in order to heal your body and to get you recovered and regenerate. And this is the system that we touched upon a long time ago where we said about sleep, which is very, very important. Delta waves, I don't know if you guys remember that, but that's the deepest of the brain waves. And it's the one that gets stimulated only within the first hour and a half of sleep. After that, you can't get to it anymore. So this is why it's very important. Why you do the microstretching before sleep is you're prepping the body to get that restful sleep. When I stretch, when Jimson stretches, even Mike, when we stretch just before we go to bed, it's the deepest sleep. It just baffles me. It just blows my mind away. Anyhow, so scar tissue. What we're mostly focused on is at the myotendon junction. I mean, there's another junction as well. It's known as the osteotendon. So the tendon connects to the bone. And then the muscle myotendon junction is what we're concerned mainly with, mainly because that's where 90% of all injuries happen. So what you're seeing in this diagram, can you guys see my cursor? Yes, you can. Yeah. So what you're seeing in the diagram is this wave-like sort of really dense fibrous material. This is called collagen, but this is your tendon. And this material here that has got like lines, striated lines, that's your muscle. The only time I'm ever concerned about muscle is contusions, where if you get a pretty bad Charlie horse, you develop what is known as Myositis Ossificans, which basically means that the muscle is it's almost as dense as bone, doesn't have the pliancy. Okay, that's the only time. Other than that, muscle stretches 1.5 times its own length. The tendon itself, you stretch 4% of its length, you've ruined it. But interestingly enough, the tendon lies between the structural integrity of a bone and that of muscle. So anytime you look at a lot of serious tendon issues, chances are either you're going to have a massive rip or tear in the muscle, or you're going to have a bone avulsion. I have seen athletes where they literally pulled bone away from bone, but the tendon was still intact. So it's a very strong fibrous tissue. And so this diagram here, what you're seeing here is an actual muscle fiber, and all that sort of scarry looking thing. It's not scarry, but it's that material there. That's your tendon. That's your collagen, okay? So what you're seeing here is muscle, and you're seeing at this junction here is where you're actually seeing a strain. So this is a muscle strain. Look at the tendon. The tendon is still intact. It's 1 millimeter into the muscle is where you're going to have that damage. So this is a strain within 48 hours. All these little black things that you see here, these little dots, they're known as your fibroblasts. These are the cells that are going to come in and start laying down your new scar or your new tissue. Thing with the fibroblasts, interestingly enough, if they're not turned off by a thing called MMP, which is an enzyme, metalloproteinase, what that does is they can continue laying down more tissue, more collagen, and they can continue creating fibrotic tissue. The interesting thing about proper stretching with scar tissue is if you actually cause pain and discomfort as this is being laid down, you're going to cause more fibrotic tissue to develop. I worked with Muay Thai kickboxers when I was living in Vancouver, and this one guy came to me, and even ballerinas. I even worked with the Ballet BC, British Columbia, and I also worked with the Royal Birmingham Ballet. And these people here, they have amazing flexibilities. Interestingly enough, they have amazing flexibilities in certain ranges as well. But this one particular Muay Thai athlete came to me. He was able to put his leg standing up straight, put his leg to his side. He couldn't do that anymore. He had suffered a hip injury, and within 6 weeks, even less than that, he lost all his range of motion, because the range of motion that he developed was through scar tissue. So this is another thing that happens. When you develop range of motion through aggressive stretching, you're also developing a lot more scar tissue. You may get that length, you may get some sarcomerogenesis, which means you may add more muscle cells to the end, but predominantly there's a lot of scar tissue in there. And the interesting thing about scar tissue is as it ages, it compresses, so it tightens up. So these fibroblasts, they come in within 3 to 5 days, and then they stimulate. So on the outside of the muscle cell here, you have your stem cells. So they stimulate the stem cells to start the growth. So, and this is after 7 days, and you can see that right here in this area here is scar tissue. And this is where a lot of therapists will go in there and they will try to break down that scar tissue and try to give you that suppleness. So while this is being laid down, why not do something that's going to help it, guide it in a way where now it's going to fall more in a parallel fashion? Because this is how the tissues really move. The tendons move this way. Okay, so, and this is the muscle here. So the key is, as the fibroblasts are being laid down, they'll lay down like this. Why don't you apply enough gentle pressure on the outside to have them lie in a parallel fashion, which is what we want. Okay, so this is a ligament, and this is a normal looking ligament, and there's your scar tissue. Okay. So you can see it's very bird nesty, it's very fibrous, it's not aligned properly, and that's the issue that we deal with when we develop scar tissue in our musculoskeletal system. We have to now take that and try to align it to make it look more or less like the left. It'll never get there. Once it's damaged, but you will never get it to the point where it is when it's normal looking. You'll get it close. I like the rooster in the background. That's great. Now, I did this diagram. Took me about a day and a half, but what I wanted to show you guys is basically what happens when we go from muscle damage or tissue damage. And as you can see, B just basically means surviving muscle fibers. So we have a tear here. So what happens is you actually start the process. So how the process of scar tissue starts is you affect the vascular bed, the vascular bed sends a signal to the rest of the body saying we've got an issue here. And then all of a sudden these cells come in, white blood cells are what stimulate it. And you have what are known as neutrophils. So neutrophils are your small Pac-Men, and they come in within a day and they stay there for about 3 days. And then, so as you can see, this is the third day here. And then you have the bigger Pac-Men, the big monsters. They're the macrophages. They're going to come in there. And what they're trying to do is they're trying to remove all the damage. So as the neutrophil comes in, the small Pac-Man eats all the damaged tissue. It starts dying. So rather than the body allowing it to stay there, it has to remove it. So the big Pac-Man comes in, eats the neutrophil, pulls it out, and that stimulates the beginning of the stem cells. So what you're seeing here is in E is you're starting to see the stimulation of the stem cells themselves. So we've gone through day 5 day is the macrophages. And by the way, during all this time is when you release those pro-inflammatory proteins, the same proteins that are being released during the COVID-19. They're causing that reaction. So they're being released as a way of the body wanting to mend itself. The issue becomes then when you actually continue something that's aggressive or painful, you can perpetuate what was started off as an acute injury and it becomes chronic. And this can continue to the point where it'll affect muscle growth and you're scarring more. You're putting more scar tissue in the area. So basically H is getting close to A, which is what your tissue should look like. Okay, so quickly in a nutshell, I did this too. So just to show you a difference between an acute injury. So we have a healthy muscle, it's injured, and these are your fibroblasts. They go in there and they're laying down the new tissue, they stimulate the stem cell, it's being laid down the new tissue, but we are actually helping the tissue recover. And as you can see, it's somewhat near the healthy muscle, but it's getting there. Now this here, and let me tell you, this is muscular dystrophy. It's not that we're all going to end up like this, but this is what damaged muscle looks like. And I can tell you right now that all this white stuff, this scar tissue, is something that we will develop, not to the extent of MD, but to the extent of having more scar tissue in our muscles if we don't take the proper time to recover and regenerate, which is very, very important. Okay, so Nathan from Loughborough, you saw this diagram the other day, and this is a rabbit tendon. And the far diagram where my cursor is, this is a immobilized rabbit. So they scarred him up. They cut his tendon with this mechanism that had about 3 or 4 Wilkinson blades on them. And then they immobilized them. As you can see up here, the tendon is very amorphous, not very robust, and it doesn't have, it's not heterogeneous. It just doesn't have the look of a normal tissue. And down here, you can see all these lesions. This is a rabbit that's allowed to move. This is why it's very, very important that when we do have an injury, you try to basically introduce movement again. I mean, the only reason why we're now getting patients out of their beds after surgery is to prevent pleurisy, to prevent lungs being filled up with fluids. And the only reason we got to that is because we used to watch animals, and as soon as the animal had its surgery, the vets used to watch this animal a day later and it's walking around trying to become mobile, and they realized, circulation, very, very important. It's the same thing here. So in this area here, this guy is caged but allowed to be mobile. As you can see, he's got more, homogeneous look in his tissue, but not quite like the one to your far right. Now that is a technique known as continuous passive motion. It was a technique developed by Robert Salter at the University of Toronto back in the 70s and 80s. And it's a mechanism where they actually, after they've had surgery, they would put a person, they would put them in this mechanism, and it takes 45 seconds to move out, 45 seconds to move back. It applies gentle stress. And as you can see, the tendon itself is a lot more robust. In fact, the caged animal, to get to where this animal is, which is the CPM animal, which was gentle movement and not causing more trauma, not causing more damage, not causing more pain, this would take another 6 weeks to get to this stage here. And as you can see, the fibers are in parallel fashion, which is what we want. So scar tissue, this is hyaline cartilage, the same thing. Gentle stretching, CPM, casted. As you can see, the cells, the hyaline cartilage cells on the CPM side, they're bigger, they're more robust, but there's not as many lesions in the tissue. And again, gentle movement. This is all it is. It's gentle movement, gentle stress lines. And here on your far right, he actually did a genius thing. I found this very genius, where he put carbon fiber rods into these poor rabbits. And then he applied gentle stress. And as you can see, as the fibroblasts were being laid down, they were being laid down in following the line of the carbon fiber rod, which is fascinating. This, to me, just blew my mind away. So the take-home message, again, is you have to provide gentle stress in order to help your tissue heal. And if you cause pain and discomfort, you're just causing inflammation, and inflammation could lead to more fibrotic tissue. So that's it for now. Stop sharing. Any questions?
Yeah, I've got one, Nico.
Okay.
You said the first 90 minutes of sleep produce the best delta waves.
Yeah.
When can you re-stimulate the delta waves? How long do you have to wait in your next sleep?
Your next cycle, which is probably the next day. This is why a lot of athletes get sleep deprived. This is why we're having one of the biggest issues we have in professional sports, Alan, and even in track and field, is when you're traveling. When I was working in the NBA, we used to travel once or twice a week. So the big issue became the athletes themselves. They didn't get that deep sleep. So a lot of them ended up having sleep deprivation. And when eventually your body will actually knock you out and you will sleep 17, 18-hour days. But to answer your question, once the first, and the interesting thing about it is they're looking at a sleep cycle of 7 to 8 hours. So 8 hours being optimal, unless you're a growing child where you're sleeping 10 or 12. But what they're what they've ascertained is that regardless of the ages and all this, it's the first 90 minutes to 2 hours when you can get into those delta waves. Other than that, the body is REM, which is rapid eye movement, which you're coming out of your sleep phase. And then you'll go to only as low as theta. Delta is one step lower than that. And so the next time would be the next day.
How come like in professional baseball and maybe hockey playoffs, as soon as the game is over, they fly out to the next city? And it's pretty bad when you have East Coast and West Coast, like, the Montreal Canadiens and LA Kings. You're playing 2-2, 1-1-1, and you're crisscrossing across the continent. But why do all professional teams insist on flying out right after the game? To save on one-night hotel?
Jimson, that's a good question, because I remember flying. We just finished playing in New York City when I was working with the Milwaukee Bucks. The next thing you know, we're on a plane out to LA. I have no clue what it is. Is it scheduling? Because most athletes, like when we used to fly to, we went from here. I'll give you an example. We just finished playing the Charlotte Hornets in Milwaukee, and then we got on a plane. We arrived in New York City at 3 a.m, and we had our court booked for practice at 9. Breakfast was at 8, court practice at 9, game at 7. So there's that scheduling thing too. And I ideally, if you could, it would be best to sleep right after a game and then get on a plane. But the way the scheduling is done, I guess that it doesn't allow for that. But that's a good question.
A part B question, Nico, says, if you've got a strain or an injury, and you're trying to stimulate the regeneration through your microstretching and your delta waves of sleeping, could you cut your sleep pattern and then get back to sleep early again so you can regenerate in a lesser number of days?
Could you cut your sleeping pattern to be able to?
Yeah, or even break your sleep. You sleep for say 3-4 hours, get up for a couple hours, and then go back to sleep. Would you regenerate the delta waves in
That is a good question. I don't know the answer to that one, but all I know that a lot of studies that have looked at sleep that's been truncated like that the issue becomes that eventually there is a sleep deprivation. So the question then becomes, does the person touch delta doing something like that?
Mm-hmm.
And I can only surmise that they don't. Now, the other thing to add to Jimson too is this circadian rhythm. You're out on the West Coast or the East Coast and you're flying to the West Coast and there's an imbalance or what we call jet lag too. So that does definitely affect sleep as well. So I have no answers. I mean, if we could figure out with sleep, because sleep is the ultimate recovery regeneration tool we have, Yeah.
Joy's got a question.
Who?
Joy.
Oh, Joy. How did it go last week? How did it go with, what's his name, Michael Smith or whoever it was?
Oh, Ed Miller. Good.
That's it. Ed Miller.
Yeah, about training and stuff. And I just wanted to reconfirm, when you have a mentor, you want to just reconfirm some information and learn.
But Jimson's your mentor.
Yes, Jimson. Yeah, Jimson's awesome. His speed endurance site is just awesome.
I know.
They're all the time. So the question I really, and why I'm on here is I love this information and I loved how you reviewed too in the beginning, what of your old presentation, not old presentation, but what we saw in the first thing, because it sort of gets us ticking again. So with the sleep and the micro stretching in the evening, what if you have an athlete and they can't sleep or get up in the middle of the night, or, well, I know there's a lot of environment and stress and things going on. And I'm saying, well, for any athlete and ourselves, if you can't sleep, could you get up and say like, I'm just getting up and do the micro stretching, laying and putting your leg up on the wall and this and that? Would your body just go like, okay, here we go, we're unwinding properly, and then you could sleep better?
I've done that myself.
Really? Okay. Yeah,
I have. Do I touch delta waves? I don't know. That's a really good question, because I mean, we're still at the infancy with regards to sleep. I mean, a lot of scientists are still trying to figure out why we sleep, but what the microstretching would do, and what it's done for me in that particular thing, it just calmed me down enough so then I can continue getting my sleep. So maybe theta, maybe alpha, but delta, Joy, that would be a really good PhD. Anybody out there want to do a PhD?
Yeah, that would be good, huh?
If nothing else, it gets you to sleep.
Well, it does, and that's the main thing. Sleep is the key. So I have used it in the past where I've had a pretty bad injury, and it would wake me up in the middle of the night, and then I would actually go and do the microstretching to try to calm, first of all. And like Tom Walsh alluded to earlier too, in his conversations as well that he gave to us as PowerPoint, breathing is also important. So if you actually use the microstretching and use the breath and then activate the parasympathetic, because the interesting thing about people that are in pain, in discomfort, they're shallow breathers. If you look at them, so what you want to do, and eventually the body does this beautifully. It actually, at some point, the body does one of these, that nice deep, I love that nice deep sigh. That's your parasympathetic system. That's your system saying, okay, guys, enough. We need to kick it in. So using the microstretching as a way to calm you down. I mean, if the athlete's got a very big sort of competition the next day, it's a good thing to do. And I've done it before, and it has calmed me down and it's put me to sleep.
Okay, thanks. I just, was curious about the timing, because I know that there are some different timings that you were focusing on, like 2 hours after, not before, right before you go to sleep. But what if you're trying to sleep and you're tossing, turning, you're injured, or or even if you're not injured and you're like, wait, you know, that's why I just wanted to ask you that.
Well, the thing is, Joy, it's almost like a meditation. If you do microstretching properly, it's almost like you're meditating.
Right.
You know?
Yeah, I like meditation. I've been doing that for a while now. And that's ever since I've been because I had a real bad injury and I went everything and I tried everything and all my high performance friends, all the physios I know, and I just couldn't. And so I'm like, you know what? I'm just going to do acupuncture and meditation. And guess what? I mean, I haven't been hurt for a while. So that I just, yeah, Insight Timer is really good because you can have their sleep, meditation, you know, all these different things. But yes, the breathing. And then that's why the micro stretching I really think is great because it's like you're saying, it's parallel.
Yeah, and it helps you calm you down and get you ready for sleep, and which is the key. Like I've often said, you know, microstretching is just a tool to facilitate proper recovery regeneration, and that tool is sleep. It's Morpheus. Morphine, Morpheus.
Yeah. But no, this is great information, and thanks.
Oh, and I mean, and listen, I was thinking because I looked at what Richie sent out, and I'm going like, oh my God, we only got 8 more sessions, and I'm thinking, if you guys want to continue this, I'm more than happy to do this because I just love and bring questions, guys, because this is the main thing. It's and because this is how we're going to get. And thanks to Jimson, of course, with his speedendurance.com, because he does put this on there. It reaches 25,000 people. Jimson and I worked together at the IAAF. We were co-editors with the New Studies in Athletics, which unfortunately is probably, it's received its last breath.
I was just told that it will no longer be going. It's under current plans. That was from somebody like 2 weeks ago.
Yeah, I know.
They don't know what else will be going either.
Well, it's too bad because it's probably one of the best journals for track and field that we have. And unfortunately, the stuff that's been going on in the IAAF, they've been spending a lot of money just propping up their image and taking the money away from the coaches association, which is what Victor Lopez started. Pardon me, Peter?
No change there then.
No.
No change there. They changed their name. No change there.
Well, you know that pretty soon your next head of labor is going to be Sebastian Coe. You know that, so.
Hey, Nikos, when you're talking last week about order of stretches for certain injuries, and you mentioned again today, one thing that might be something you could do or Mike could help you with or something is just maybe think of, okay, hip flexors. What would be the order that you'd start with for that? Hamstrings. What would be the order so make like a recipe. And it doesn't have to, it might be like you've told me before, to do this and this for this thing. Maybe some of the major type ones, maybe 5 or 6 of the major ones, and just put a little order together of what the logical sequence would be for that, since you've talked about the sequencing is important.
Here, let me show you guys.
Wouldn't you start from large muscle groups down to small muscle groups, just like doing any weight training?
Not necessarily. I mean, it depends on, again, let me see if I could find, I did one for Carl Georgievsky, a PowerPoint one.
Well, always, in some ways, you always start with the hips on out anyway too, since that.
Well, the hips are a major area because that's, like I said last time, one of the conversations we had, we said the clutch system of the body, remember, and that everything emanates around that area. So your lower body and your upper body meet around the thoracolumbar fascia area, and that's the area that needs to be looked at with regards to helping the person recover. I'm trying to find this diagram, so bear with me, guys, because it'll show you, it's exactly what Richie says, and this is something that Mike and myself and Jimson's been helping a lot as well. We've been trying to put together a course that we want to teach on this, and there's a diagram in here that basically will literally answer your question, Richie, if I can find it now. Lord, but it does. It shows actually the hip flexor issue, which, oh, let me show the Hunter Chernesky one. That's the one that Alan was making reference to, and I think I can get to that one a lot faster. There's so much stuff on this. Yeah, here's the document. Let me see, Hunter Chernesky, where are you? There you are.
You got to hit the share screen again.
Yeah, I am. Okay, so let's do the share screen again. So share screen. Share. You guys see this?
Mhm.
Yep.
There. So this is a sequence that I put together for Hunter. Hunter has a left Achilles issue, soleus, or has actually got an Achilles issue. So the only thing I ask, guys, if you use these diagrams, just please reference the source. That's all. It's very important.
Mhm.
I know you guys will. I know you guys will. But so what we were looking at is he actually has like a little calcification in his Achilles tendon. And I'm actually going to bring him on next week to talk, to let you guys know how he progressed. So the issue is we calmed so this is the sequence that we put together. And somebody's going to say, hey, but Nick, it's not following your order and insertion thing. That's the ideal situation. But when you're dealing with athletes that have certain injuries that we want to focus on, one thing that we did this way is I first of all relaxed the soleus muscle, which was very, very important. Interestingly enough, you got to realize that you are connected through fascia. End of story. Your whole body. If I were to move my skin, I were to move my muscle, my bones, you will have an invisible, basically you'll have a fascial mat. So I find with my left Achilles tendon that when I'm stretching my hip flexor, when I'm stretching my QL or thoracolumbar fascia, as Alan was alluding to last week, and then I go into my T-band. I kid you not, because part of my issue with my left Achilles tendon is that I have some really bad plantar fascia, and it has nothing to do with the fascia being damaged. It has everything to do with the fact that my body now has a pattern, and I'm still breaking it down because I'm still active, but it's the proprioceptive tissues. So as I'm about to land on my left leg, automatically my whole left side tightens up, and it's almost as if I'm throwing my leg through as a pendulum. I'm exaggerating now, but you'll get the idea. But the fact that I'm tensing it before I'm actually allowing it to touch the ground is tensing up all the fascia, and the plantar fascia itself is just the ligaments and tendons that are coming off the back of the leg. Oh, somebody else. Okay. And what it does is it basically, it tightens up, and then you have, I don't know if you've ever had plantar fasciitis, but it's very, very painful. So when you touch your plantar on the bottom of your foot, it's, see, not bad for a guy who's not bad, eh? So the plantar here, and if prior to starting those stretches, if I touch this area here, it is so tense, it's so tight. But as soon as I finish the sequencing of stretches and I touch it, it's a lot looser. So the indication is that the fascia is still connected. So getting back to Hunter, he had an issue with his Achilles tendon, his left side. So the idea was to relax that area first, and then we go into the hip flexor. Why the hip flexor? Because as I said earlier on, and I alluded to in previous conversations and this one as well, that hip area, the hip flexor area, it's the clutch system of the body. The thoracolumbar, remember the diamond shape in the back and the hip flexors in the front, they actually determine how the body responds to movement. You have to have some movement in your SI joints, your sacroiliac joints. A lot of people that are compromised, they don't have any movement in there. So instead of them moving like this, they move like this. Their hips do this motion. And it's telling you how compromised it becomes. So we went, remember, this is an Achilles issue, but we went into his hip flexors. And then the next stretch in the series was the IT band. Now, why wouldn't I do this stretch before that one? Because if he was doing this and he was feeling it anteriorly, it's telling me that his hip flexor is very tight. And then from there, we go into the glutes and we're back to the Soleus stretch. And he's been doing this for 6 weeks and he has found that he's jumping better, he's running faster, and he should be ready for to get on the track. He hasn't been on the track for a while. So yeah, Richie, we do have these. And this is one thing that Mike and myself are working on, putting together a whole idea of sequences of stretches to do for $4.99. Just joking. That's $4.99 euros.
Canadian? That's only $1.10 here, isn't it?
Sorry, Nikos, does he only do those sequence of stretches?
He does these sequence of stretches before he goes to
only
sleep.
those sequences, only that, no other
Only
stretches.
those. That's what he does.
Okay.
And the one thing he's commented on left, right, and center is he says, Nick, he says, I'm sleeping a lot better.
Yeah.
And that's the key. So yeah, there are issues like, I mean, I've mostly targeted the lower body, but you know, there are upper body stretches that we put together as well. But the key is you have to be able to look at the muscles, what's affected. And the other thing that's very, very important is you just can't focus on the muscle or the issue at hand, which is what a lot of people tend to do. They tend to focus on, if they have a right hamstring issue, let's say one of the 3 hamstring muscles, the outer one, which is the biceps femoris, a lot of physios will focus on that. And I'm saying to myself, I don't care about that one hamstring muscle. That one hamstring muscle is one of 3. And then we've got 4 quadriceps. We've got 6 external rotators in the hips. We've got the IT band. We've got the gracilis. We've got the sartorius. We've got the 5 adductors, or your 5 groin muscles. So you've got basically 26 muscles that stem from the top of the hip to the knee, and then you've got another 26 on the other side. So you've got 52 in this whole system, and you've got 1 injured. That one will start affecting the rest. But doesn't it make sense that if you actually start working on what the other ones that are being affected by the one that was the initial injury is the one that'll heal, because all the other ones are helping it heal.
The other thing too is part of the reason that one got injured is maybe because of imbalances and tightness in the other 51. So,
could be.
Hey, one thing, working with high school athletes, mostly, some other juniors and things, and a lot of times boys who, you know, no pain, no anything, and not necessarily listening all the time. One thing, when I've been doing some of these, I've realized, like the hip flexor stretch, having a chair or something and using it to support myself, and I tend to do this anyway. I'm getting there, I'm relaxing, I'm breathing, and then I realize I'm so tight in my shoulder trying to push myself up, support, and take weight off that I'm kind of defeating the whole purpose, because I'm tightening everything up, and you know, it's becoming last thing in the world to get into that parasympathetic. So I'm trying to find a balance of where to just give a little support. I think I felt like I had to have more support side, and that's kind of hard to teach some of the
Well,
kids.
the issue then becomes, how high is the support itself? If the chair's too high, you're like this, no.
Well, but also not having a sense of, okay, I've just got my hand gently right here. Am I taking enough support off to keep the contraction? And literally right now what I'm doing, I'm kneeling on the carpet and I'm at the dining room table right here. Actually, I can put one leg up and do that. I'm doing it right now, and I'm like here, and I'm just resting and relaxing. I've been doing that.
Well,
it's
minutes. Like the stretch. It's like the stretch that I showed last time using the chair. Remember? I'm not even going to go there. Like I said, I bought this thing, and I'm going to have to see to get it. But the chair is perfect, because when you use a chair, okay. Let's just see.
You got to tilt it down. Yeah, there you go. That ought to work. You're actually sitting on it.
It's the hip flexor stretch, but you're just sitting on it. And this is really good for elderly people.
What are you saying?
I'm talking about myself.
Thanks.
I'm talking. Hey,
this is the last micro stretching of the series now.
Richie, we're practically the same age. Hey, who's Kevin? Who's Kevin Reed? Can you show yourself, Kevin?
Oh, he's good.
Kevin's a young guy here.
Ah.
Yeah, and Brian Clay's coach, people.
Oh, okay. What's Brian up to lately?
I don't know about young. He's living he's living in the Seattle area, and he's working with a gym franchise that he created called Eat the Frog Fitness.
Oh,
Going back to the old Mark Twain quote. And if you get up in the morning and eat a frog, you know it, the rest of the day is probably going to be pretty good.
Yep.
Yeah, he's doing well.
It's good to meet you, Kevin.
Yeah,
I mean, the only reason why I ask is I'm just trying to see faces like Violetta. Who's Violetta? If you could show yourself. I know Nathan. Nathan, you could show yourself. Anyways. But no, this is great. So, Kevin, what we've been trying to do here is just getting together and talking about recovery, regeneration, and putting together ideas.
Kevin was on the first one we did.
Oh, was he?
When we did the actual virtual Congress, like it seemed like seemed like a week ago. That's probably 6 weeks ago.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's true.
Does it seem to anybody else like we've already gone all the way through the summer, but it's only June 2nd or June 3rd? It's like,
I don't know about you guys, but they've actually increased the state of emergency till the end of June.
Same here in Scotland. They've done the same.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Crazy.
Meanwhile, in England, they're trying to gradually open things up, which is it's way too soon.
Mm-hmm.
Way too soon.
I tell you, I've been riding my
Wales
bike.
and Scotland are a bit smarter than England at the moment.
The leader is.
I'm on the bike and the elliptical a lot, and I cross this street. Cheryl knows, cross Westheimer right near Edlow. And last Friday at 2:30, it took me 3 full minutes to get across. It was like a normal Friday 6 months ago. There were so many cars.
Really?
Everything's going everywhere, and
Oh, we'll see. Time will tell. But I gotta hand it to the Scottish people listening to nature with the Bruce who looked at the was it the spider?
Yep. At first you don't succeed, try again.
Yep. But he looked at that spider, did it 8 times, and it was the 9th time, and then he says, "Yeah, we're ready for war." Basically. Any other questions?
Oh, I've got a couple actually, Nikos.
Okay, Tom, show yourself.
You probably don't want to see me right now, but
Okay. Fire
since you
away.
insisted. So I've been playing around with something. I'll get your thoughts on it. Is trying to put like a frontal plane lean on the hip flexor stretch to get into psoas iliacus complex, and then with other people I'll do something under the shin to target rec fem more, because I find that some of the people who they really don't respond to rec fem, they really respond to psoas iliacus. Your thoughts on that? Because what Richie was saying about holding yourself up made me think about that. Like I've done, in like the ballet, what you'd call that thing, the balustrade thing the ballet dancers hold on to.
Yeah, the bar.
Yeah, I'd get them to like hold on to that so they're semi-supported while they lean away to sort of open the stretch up a little bit more. because I'm thinking about that frontal plane orientation for psoas iliacus.
But are they down on the knee, or are they actually?
It's the same stretch as the one in your picture. It's just
so all you're doing is you're just forcing the anterior pelvis forward a little.
No. The pelvis is it's frontal plane.
Okay.
So pelvis is still. I'm trying to keep pretty neutral pelvis, because otherwise they do that thing where they go anterior and they think, oh, look what a big stretch, and they're not even touching the muscle. It's more frontal plane to try get into just that the way in which the muscle's orientated.
So, but they're in that position and they're in the frontal plane. So what are you doing with the shin? Are you raising the shin up a bit, you said?
That's the other one. That's for rec fem. So then if I'm trying to target rec fem, same as your stretch, but then, and I try to make them really comfortable. Like I'll always get them to put something soft under their knee.
So you put something on the knee and then you would put something. So guys, what I'm doing in this diagram, am I still sharing, Richie?
No, you're not sharing yet.
Okay, let me share. Shoot me again so I could share. Start share.
I can give an example of the rec fem one in the chat, actually.
So here's the hip flexor stretch, correct?
So yes, that one there.
So now you put something. If you're putting something underneath here, you're raising the lower leg up, right? Correct?
Yeah.
Yeah, you will hit the rec fem more that way. Yep.
And then the other one I'm talking about would be, if that's the right leg we're looking at,
right,
then I would get them to have a supported, gentle lean to the left. So
so they're leaning away from it.
Yeah, and then I'm trying to get more into psoas iliacus like that. And I've just found playing around with like clients and athletes that the ones that don't really get much of a response in rec fem, they actually tend to get it psoas iliacus and vice versa. But would you have any thoughts on that? Would you like contraindicate that? I'm still going for like 30%. I'm still giving them a minute. It's still a parasympathetic thing. I'm not trying to increase flexibility.
So the question I would have then is, if they're leaning away, so if they do the lean on the other side, let's say if we switch the leg, do they get the same response? Because if you're leaning away, so in this case, they're leaning away from the right leg, going towards the left side. The only thing that you're going to hit there is you're going to hit the TFL more. So the TFL, guys, is your tensor fascia latae, which is a very, very small muscle. If you guys can see me, it's a very, very small muscle up here. You're going to hit that more, and then you're going to hit your QL. So the question I would actually have you do before, and we can continue next week, is see if there's a difference in the lean. And if there is a difference in the lean, remember, guys, the one thing that we've been trying to sort of get across to the group here is that stretching can be used as a diagnostic tool, which is very important. So what you're seeing me think right now out loud is that if the person is now leaning away from the thigh, the right thigh, and he's going to the left and he's picking up something anterior in the hip, and then he flips around and does the same, but he's not picking up that a similar type of sensation, then that could be that there's a muscle imbalance in there that needs to be addressed. So do the one where you get them on both sides, left and right, and see if there's a difference in sensation as well. Now, having said that, if you really wanted to target the psoas itself, or the iliacus, because the psoas is targeted just by creating that more lordotic curve, which I don't recommend doing. If you want to hit the iliacus, then you could rotate this whole system here slightly to the left. If I rotate the leg here slightly to the left, it's going to open up my quad, because remember, the insertion of the iliopsoas is the lesser trochanter in the femur. If I rotate this whole system, this foot now comes towards us, I am not going to hit the insertion of the iliopsoas as much as if I rotate the leg the other way. So it goes outwards. So the foot here is going towards the left. It's not going towards the right.
You're talking external rotation.
Yeah, external and internal rotation. Correct.
So if you're, would you say that's probably going to be more relaxing than the lean?
No, because when you do an external rotation, you're still going to maintain that lean in there, right? It's just one way of hitting the insertion of the iliopsoas more if you do that. I've done this a lot before that stretch. But
Okay, cool.
having with your athletes and clients or patients, it's always important to get them to do the stretch on both sides, because then you're going to know if there's an imbalance or not. If they're picking up the same sensation, 5 on the right, 5 on the left, nothing. But if they're picking 7 on the right and then 3 on the left, there's an issue.
Mm.
Okay.
I put the other stretch in the chat, Nikos, if you want to click on it, the rec fem one.
Okay.
But just the other question I had was, were you talking about the fibrosis?
Fibrotic tissue, or?
So were you talking about the contusions, and then the contusions they lead to like the fibrosis?
Oh, Myositis Ossificans is what a contusion does. So basically there's an impact in the muscle, because the muscle is between the impacting and the pulverizing instrument and the bone. It hits, there's a huge hematoma, and it's that hematoma that can cause the Myositis Ossificans. So it actually, how do you say it? It gets really, really tough.
So, because what I found is that it can lead to all sorts of different interruptions in movement somewhere in the chain.
Mm-hmm.
And do you do any like manual therapy thing? Because some people try and massage it directly. Some people try and like get relative tissue movement with glides.
This is where you have to take microstretching level 1, level 2, level 3. No, seriously, and I'm not joking. I'm serious. There is, what I'm showing you guys is what we call self stretches. Mm-hmm. What I do in the clinic, and Jimson's been stretched by me. Richie's been stretched by me in Puerto Rico, and Mike Chamello's been stretched by me as well. It's a different thing. It's I place the body in certain positions where I'm literally using the lever system of the body itself to target the areas that I'm trying to do to open it up, and it's totally different. Yeah, there are things that I would do to a person that would come to me that would have issues like that for sure. But and that's
But it's that the tissues respond to the force, and you're using stretching to get the force into the tissues.
But again, it's how you place the limb, the stretching itself. I mean, I should get either Jimson or Mike to talk, because they would be able to explain it from their point of view. But it's very, very gentle, and it's relaxing. But it's you got to relax the neural system as well. But again, you have to put the body in a certain position where you're going to facilitate that.
Yeah, I think the problem with most people is that they think you have to feel something for it to work. We're all, masochists.
Feel pain for it to work.
Yeah, we need to feel, or something. We need something, and that's the problem. We think it has to be felt, and the thing is, you don't need it to be felt. And the thing is, 1 minute, which is the average time for people watching YouTube videos anyway, is a long time for some people. And the fact that you have to do 3 times 1 minute per body part, so it's 6 minutes for one exercise, or one muscle group, and that's 6 minutes. And so you can only do maybe 6, 7 at the most in a given night. I don't do all body. I just mostly do the parts where I feel tight from my workouts. It's always the same. It's always the lower back, always the hips, always the hamstrings. Actually, never the quads. My quads are fine. So you just do as much as you can. And with today's mobile phones, cell phones, you just set your beeper to 1 minute and you let it beep every minute on the minute, EMOM, and just put some music on and just relax.
Oh,
or have silence, pure silence.
Jimson, what I said we do with some version of mine is to create silence. But even when I do it myself, kind of combining what Tom talked about with the deep breathing and stuff, we do the things together. So we don't even use a timer, because the other thing too is a lot of times the athletes, especially high school athletes, after 10 seconds they're looking at their phone and checking their text while they're and so you put everything away, you close your eyes, you can have relaxing music, but you relax, long, slow, deep breath in, long, slow, deep breath out is about 10 seconds. You do 6 of those, and then it kind of gives you something that it kind of makes it go better. I kind of compare it to, I ran the 400 hurdles only a couple times, but the 400 hurdles I love so much more than the open 4, because you weren't in pain thinking about 300 to go or 200 to go or the next curve. You were focusing on the next hurdle, and then all of a sudden you were done. You were fried, but it's the same thing. You do the breathing, you can, okay, that's one. And then it's done. And then you go to the next one, and I agree, you can't, it is a lot to do if you're strapped for time like everybody, but the breathing, instead of counting or looking at a watch or even hearing a beeper, kind of gives you a deeper level of you're in control of it, you're relaxing.
I have a question for Debbie. How was your stretch during that? Because you had a specific question last week that we tried to answer.
Yeah. So I've been doing this stretching. The one thing around the hip flexor exercise is 10 years ago, I had an ACL problem. And so I put a pillow under my right knee, but it still irritated it.
So do the chair.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking, the chair. And a PT person told me, I don't know what you think about it, but to lie on a bench or a high bed and the edge, and then you let one leg hang down to kind of stretch your hip flexor.
Okay. I'm glad you brought that up. So the problem I have with that particular stretch is once the leg is hanging over the bed, the tendency is that it's going to torque your pelvis forward. Not only that, but the problem with that, if you actually hung your leg over the bed and you had a support underneath it that it actually was stopped by, then fine, I would accept it. But the fact that the leg is just hanging over, that hanging over motion is just basically telling me that your hip flexor is going to get involved. It's going to contract to keep that leg hanging over. So I would say no to that stretch. This is just my personal opinion, but the chair stretch is probably one of the best ones.
Yep. Okay.
Yeah.
So that was a question that I had. So, but the chair stretch seems like it would be.
Try the chair. I just did it after he showed that, and it's kind of nice because it's just a regular dinner table chair, and it's the perfect height.
Yep.
Well, the good thing about a chair that's got a backing too, and this answers another question, is if I've got my back like this, so I'm doing my hip flexor. Okay, you guys picture me. I'm doing my hip flexor stretch this way, correct? Now, if I rotate like this and I grab the back and come forward, I'm going to hit my QL. So now I'm hitting part of the thoracolumbar fascia, but I'm also stretching my QL muscle. So this chair is perfect for stretches that target, because a lot of people tend to have, trigger points right down in the QL area. So this stretch helps as well. Any other questions before we call it I'm just reading some of the comments here. You don't have to send me a gift card.
Get him a Tim Hortons card.
Actually, you know what I would really love? I would really love to continue this and bring more people on board. Now we brought Kevin's on board, and let's just bring more people, because the more we get, hey, we are masters athletes. I was a rower myself.
Yay.
Yay, rowing. The thing is, it just gets it out there, which is more important to me. But thanks for I'm really touched for the gift card thing. Any other questions before we call it quits? Tim, are we going to see you next week?
You're muted.
Unmute the guy.
There we go. As long as we're at 4 o'clock, I'm good to go.
Yeah.
Yeah, and please bring your athletes. I think we lost some of the athletes.
Yeah.
No, I'm going to put this out to my club as well, and the coaches that are there. And there's a handful of college coaches that are at Penn State and at Dartmouth and a couple other places, and they'd probably love to log on and get some good information. So
yeah, and I mean, you get them to bring the questions. I mean, eventually,
Yep.
Mike and I, like I said, Mike Cimello for everybody. He's my partner in crime, and like we're putting together the course. We're BOC approved right now for National Athletic Trainers Association. So if anybody knows any athletic trainers. And we're also NSCA approved now for National Strength and Conditioning Association. So any SCS people that want to take the course, because we delve more into the stuff, and which is very important, because I just think that it's not because, I mean, I've been practicing microstretching now since 1995 as a concept that's been in my head since 1986, but as a practice, it's been around since 1995. But it still sort of behooves me to see that a lot of people think that you have to take the body to pain in order to help it heal and recover, it's counterproductive. And the only reason why I know that is because I had to deal with I have a spinal fusion here at C5, C6 because of a motor vehicle. I was on my bike hit by a car. So that's how I developed microstretching. But the whole key is we got to work with nature, which is very, very important. And sleep is the key. Alberto, where are you based?
Oh, I know speaking English very well, but I thinking that how causes the fibrosis muscular tissue in the hamstring? Is that overcharging in jumps or heavy weightlifting?
Richie, are you able to translate?
Say it again, Alberto. You're asking about the hamstring,
Yes, the fibrosis muscular is caused for the overcharging or another practice sport in the hamstring?
In the hamstring, so you're telling me about fibrosis in the hamstring?
Yeah.
Can that happen through, and now you mentioned weightlifting, is the person has injured themselves while they were weightlifting in the hamstring?
No, she's practiced triple jumper, and when finished jumping, she's feeling me pain in the hamstring.
So this is after she, okay.
Yes.
So this is after she's finished her jumping. She noticed pain in the hamstring always, or just recently?
Sometimes.
might be a technical too, and if she's reaching and pulling on contact.
Okay.
But the question then becomes, if you're training her with weights, are you overtraining the hip flexors as well? Because the big issue you will see is that it may not even be a hamstring issue. The hamstring may have been sort of lengthened because of the position of the pelvis being forward. So I would like for you to look at your athlete and let me know if she's got that lordosis in her lower back to her bum, where her spine has come forward a lot. Because if that's the case, then you definitely have issues with the hip flexors, which have to be addressed. Because if those aren't addressed, she's going to continue having hamstring issues.
Yes, I tell him relax it and stretching when training program, and ask it to the another day how feeling is started again or relax it for another day training.
You know what? I hate to say, yeah. I need to get into I don't speak Spanish, man, because I know I know what I just can't figure out what you're trying to say, and that's my issue.
One thing, Alberto, can you take a video of her sprinting and maybe a video of her bounding, and Nico's email there, get that to him. I think partly from looking at her posture sprinting and maybe her position when she's bounding, You might be able to find something. A, if position's not good. B, if position's probably not good because of certain tightnesses in hip flexors.
See, a lot of issue with a lot of athletes is they're dominant on the one side, and Kevin, Kevin's gone. He's gone.
Yeah, his battery was dying.
Okay, but the thing is, one issue that you notice is that if the hip flexors are very, very tight, an athlete isn't able to, so if these are my hips, you should be able to walk straight like this. So my leg, my upper leg is coming forward and down, and my right, my left, like this. But what happens is if the hip flexor is very, very tight, the athlete can't start from the square position, so they normally start this way, you see? So there's an issue in the hip flexor. And the problem is that if they're not balanced on both sides, if this hip is slightly backwards this way, and there's an anterior tilt that way, it actually puts a lot more stress on the left hamstring.
Okay.
Because a right tight hip flexor always has a left tight hamstring involved. Keep that in mind, guys. So yeah, Tim, bring some people. Peter, bring some people. Cheryl, nice to meet you. Where did Debbie go? She left us.
Yeah, she had a meeting.
Okay. Yeah, so I'd love to continue this because you never know what this can develop into. So that would be a great thing to just to continue this a little further. Maybe once we go past the 8 days, Richie, maybe once a month, once every 2 weeks, gives people the opportunity to come up with questions and answers, and let me know.
And if you can share like the presentation you had today and then last week's maybe, and Tom, if you can do that too, just like a PDF of it, not the whole power, but a PDF, and I can put it up on the drive. So people can have
some of the material I might keep, Richie, because of the course.
Oh, that's fine.
All right.
That's fine.
Just want to put it out there. Yeah.
Tom was good too. That was great.
And Richie, what time are you scheduling for next week? Do you know already?
It's the same time every week.
Perfect. Okay.
Yeah.
All right, guys. Thanks again. I'm going to jump.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, bring questions or like do what Alan did. Alan actually, I'm at microstretching@gmail.com, Tim, and send us a question pre-head. So next week we're going to talk about cytokines, pro-inflammatory proteins.
Hey, Alan.
Yeah.
Where are you in Scotland?
How well do you know Scotland?
Well, I mean, are you near Edinburgh or?
Yep. 16 miles southeast of Glasgow, in the town called Hamilton.
He's got a Glaswegian accent, man. Glaswegian.
No, I really don't. No, I was brought up in Edinburgh.
Did you know Sandy Robertson? Did you know Sandy Robertson?
Very well, yes.
Yeah, he was.
I
guess he passed away.
Yeah, Sandy actually coached me for a little while. Just as more as a coaching mentor, but gentleman, sadly missed.
He was a good mentor and helped me with things a few years back.
Yeah, I've known Sandy. Must be nearly 30, 35 years.
Well, invite him next week.
He's passed away, unfortunately.
Oh, well, that's not going to happen.
I think he passed away about 3 years ago. Great.
Well, see if we can get Frank Dick on this one. Oh, yeah, right. That'll be a good one.
Would you like to try?
Huh?
Would you like me to try?
Yeah, if you can bring Frank Dick, that would be great.
Richie, let me talk to him. When I was in Scotland, I was actually going to meet up with him last summer, and our time schedules didn't contest with each other. But I was with him in Rome a couple of years ago, and I texted him kind of back and forth. I can see if I can ask him at least.
Tell him he came in because back when he was involved with IAAF more, he came and did stuff with us a couple times. So tell him we're doing this.
And Alberto, get a film next week of getting your athlete running, walking, front, back. And this is actually something we should think as well with you guys. If you have an athlete or even that, now with this COVID thing, but anything that we could actually look as a group. I want to look, all of us to look at this stuff as a group. Yep.
Yes, I try a video for you. The triple jump.
Yeah, send it to Richie, and that'll be great.
Okay.
Well, I always hate to end this. It's great chatting with you guys. Hopefully we'll see each other in person sometime. But Joy, thanks for the gift idea.
Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you.
Thank you.
very much. Take care, guys.
Okay, bye, guys.
Bye.
See ya.